From 12 News, this is Newsmakers.
After dragging on for years, the controversial Fane Tower that was to be built on land made vacant by the relocation of I-195 is dead. The project's demise was announced in early March. What's next for Parcel 42 and the rest of the former highway land amid an increasingly hostile financial environment for large development projects? Our guest this week on Newsmakers, I-195 Commission Chairman Marc Crisafulli. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Ted Nesi is off this week, so joining me is my colleague, Steph Machado. Marc Crisafulli from the I-195 Commission. Thanks for joining us on the program. Good to have you.
Happy to be here.
Let's dive right into the Fane project, and I want to get a better understanding of how that ended. Did Jason Fane walk away, or did the Commission pull the plug on the project?
So Jason Fane walked away. Right, he ended up withdrawing his application. Steph, as you and I discussed in the Pulse of Providence in January, the Commission was becoming increasingly uncomfortable with the concept of an indefinite commitment of this land. It's a very important parcel. We either needed to build this project or something else. And he was simply unable to meet the commitments that were required, and so we're happy to have clarity, and then we're going forward now.
Would you have pulled the plug then if he had not walked away? Were you leaning that way?
No, we were supportive of the project. He was our chosen partner. We wanted to see it built, but it had to get built. We were unwilling to allow it to proceed indefinitely.
But you needed assurances that he actually had raised the capital to build it, that he was going to have a construction contract in place, and so if those things weren't in place as we were inching closer to that March deadline to close on the sale, were you willing to pull the plug saying, we don't know if this building's going to get built?
You know, we didn't have to get to that point. We supported him as our partner. We did everything we could to try and enable him to build it, and ultimately he decided he couldn't meet those conditions and go forward.
Did you talk to Jason Fane one-on-one with him? Have you ever talked to him at all?
I did.
Yeah, and did you talk to him leading up to his decision?
I did.
And what was sort of the tone of that conversation? What did he tell you directly?
It was a very cordial conversation because, listen, he wanted to build this project. It was going to be a signature project for him. It was an important project for the city. It was a controversial project, but anytime someone's willing to invest hundreds of millions of dollars into our community, we have to take it seriously, and we have to do everything possible to try and enable that kind of investment. But ultimately, having a realistic conversation with him, it just wasn't going to happen, and he did the responsible thing and pulled out.
Fane had been under contract to buy that land for about 4 years. Did he have to pay any penalty to get out of his contract?
No, he did not, because the way it works is he had certain obligations he needed to meet, and if he met those obligations, he was allowed to buy the land. Otherwise, the land reverts to us, as it did. We never sold it. You know, part of the way we approach it generally is before we sell any land, we want to make sure the financing is in place, they have a construction contract, and they're ready to build within 90 days. Right? What the worst thing for us is that we sell land to someone and then nothing happens with it.
It's just vacant.
It's just vacant. We can't have that. We can't have a Filene's basement situation in Boston where something's half built for a decade, right? That's not going to happen. So we do everything possible to try and make sure it is fully a go before we sell the land.
Downtown crossing reference on Newsmakers. That might be a first. All right, look, Marc, we had on Senate President Dominic Ruggiero several weeks ago. This is, I should note, this is right before the Fane project ended. But I want you to listen to his comments about what he viewed as the headwind he felt the developer faced on the project. Take a listen.
What really frustrates me is when someone comes into this state and has $500 million in their pocket, and all of a sudden people start throwing up roadblocks so that person can't do business in the state. That bothers me because it sends a very bad signal across the country. In my real job, this is what I did. I work with developers to try to get people good on jobs and to create employment opportunities. And it's just like pulling teeth to try to get a contractors or developers to come here, knowing that the process that they have to go through.
So that was the Senate President. He was joined by Majority Leader Ryan Pearson there as well. Look, he's clearly frustrated. You heard him there, Marc. What would you, or maybe what have you said to him?
So what I would say is I understand his frustration and I share it to some degree, right? I understand what's involved in getting big projects built, and that's part of our mission. Our mission is economic development. There was some litigation here that really put a lot of undue pressure on this project. I don't know if it would have ever been built, but it would have had a better chance of being built absent that litigation. But this is one parcel. when you look at a number of the other things that we've either done or that we're in the process of doing, we have tremendous relationships with our development partners. They're excited to work with us. They're excited to invest in the city, and that's something that we're very proud of, and we're going to continue to do that. I tend to view what happened on the Fane project as the exception rather than the rule going forward in how we work with our development partners.
Earlier this week, Governor McKee, in sort of a scrum with reporters, said he knew the Fane Tower was never getting built. That was something that seemed to be widely understood, if not said publicly. Did he express that to you when he asked you to be the chairman of the commission? Did he say, hey, let's stop giving Fane all these extensions and make a decision here?
The governor is very supportive generally of the activities of the commission. He wants to see a lot of development. He has encouraged us to try and maximize the land values. He didn't express any particular opinion on that project. He's supportive of it could happen, but he also wanted us to do our jobs properly, and I think that's what we've done.
And you mentioned maximizing the land values. This would have been your biggest sale yet,
yes.
$3 million. It's not happening. Can you talk a little bit about how you are going to start getting more, if it's the goal, getting more money for the land in that district so you can sort of recoup some of the money that taxpayers are paying on these bonds? You know,
you and I discussed this in Pulse of Providence in January, right? There's a tension, because if your priority is to maximize land values, which is one of our priorities, the highest and best use for the land is residential. Okay? At the same time, we have a broader mission on economic development. Economic development isn't just jobs, and it's not just construction jobs. It's every aspect of it. It's healthcare, it's education, it's community items, it's the amenities to live, it's all of that. So we try and put all of that together. So as we're thinking about our priorities, one is maximizing land values, but the other is fostering that economic development that would come with commercial uses. So we're always trying to balance those competing interests to get the best overall outcome. So on some properties, it will be residential to maximize land value. On other properties, it might be a commercial project like the health lab, where we're not getting money, but it serves the greater good and it really benefits all of Rhode Islanders.
Well, you brought up the health lab, so let's talk about Parcel 25. In October, officials of all stripes broke ground on that health lab. It's the Rhode Island State Laboratories and Center for Life Sciences. We sent our Target 12 photographer down there yesterday to take a look at it, and there is really nothing going on. Do you know the status of that project?
Yeah. I think the status is moving forward quickly. We were hopeful that fencing would have actually started this past week, but we think it will start in the next week or two.
And fencing is an indication.
Fencing is an indication. Construction is about to start. We'll close on the land soon. They'll be in the ground within 90 days, and we're really excited about that project. It'll be completed by 2025.
Typically, the groundbreaking is the start of when construction is actually going to start. So was there a delay there?
No delay. That's a ceremonial groundbreaking, right? You know, the actual groundbreaking, it requires a little more. And as I mentioned earlier, we don't actually close on the land until we know we're within 90 days of them going into the ground. We feel like we're at that point now.
So the Fane Tower parcels, parcel 42, right?
Yep.
Okay. So let's look ahead on parcel 42. Maybe you don't have an answer to this, but do you know what might be the future of parcel 42, or do you know what you'd like to see as the future for 42?
Look, it's a really important parcel, right? Because it's the gateway to that 7-acre park, right? And it sits right there. So
on the other side of the footbridge, so people can visualize it. And the Wexford building is across the street.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So it's a challenging parcel, though, too, because there's no back door. Right? So as you're designing it, almost every building has got a back somewhere where you can hide a lot of stuff. This one doesn't, but that's okay. There's plenty of interest in putting another residential project there, okay? We may come to that, but our first priority is to try and find a commercial use. I don't know if that'll be viable or not, so we're gonna see. We're starting to talk to a number of people right now, and we'll see how that plays out.
Is the land on the market yet?
It's available. We're talking to developers. If you looked at our website as of yesterday, it wasn't, but the contract with Fane technically expired a couple days ago. So within the next week or so, our website will be updated, but developers already know the parcel's available.
But will you be putting out like an RFP seeking a commercial developer for this property, or are you going to take proposals from residential, all different uses?
So ultimately, we'll put out an RFP, but we're not going to do that until we have a better handle on what the likely participants are in that process. We want it to be a very successful process with a lot of competition. But that's only one parcel. We have, you'll hear in our upcoming meeting in April, we have another proposal that's about to be unveiled that we'll consider for the first time. It's on parcel 14, which is a little strip of land to the side of the park between the park and 200 Dyer, the one-story brown building, right? So that's it's a narrow sliver, but we're really excited about the project that's going to come there.
Can you give us a hint?
There's no hint yet. We're just waiting.
The show is called Newsmakers, Mark.
Well, I'm giving you a nice little teaser here for 2 weeks, Steph. You can come to the meeting by live stream. But what's important to us about that is it's a small parcel. But if we do it right, we can actually activate a master plan area on adjacent land that we don't control. And so that we're really excited about.
All right, so we're in parcel talk now.
Yeah,
and I want to bring up, Steph and I were looking at the Commission's website yesterday, and you guys have a really cool map there right on the homepage that kind of lays it all out when the land was relocated. And here it is, and we're zooming in now on parcel 5.
Yes.
Okay, so that is a large, it is, for the people at home, it's that orange block that is right kind of along the river there. That's South Water Street on one side, and then the east side is on the, sort of the east side of that parcel. Look, my opinion is not very valuable when it comes to development projects and whatnot, but just from the layman's perspective, when you look at that map, that seems like a pretty premier piece of land. It's one of the larger parcels from the relocation of I-195. It's right along the river, across from South Water Street, across from that green space that you just referenced. I mean, it's surprising to me that hasn't sold yet. Are you getting any nibbles there?
Oh, we have a lot of interest in that project, in that parcel. You're right, it's a signature parcel. If you just think about that whole cluster, for example, the map that you just showed, coming off of 195 into that whole area, that South Main Street cluster is really undergoing a major transformation right now. Between all the projects that are built and in their way, 450 housing units, a daycare center, Bank RI corporate headquarters, right? It's threaded through the City Walk going all the way. That's really exciting. But we haven't touched parcel 5 yet because right now, all of the interest we've received is residential. Okay? Nothing wrong with residential. It's an important part of what we're doing, but we would really like to explore a commercial use first. So that remains to be seen. But
you keep talking about commercial over residential, but people at home are like, don't we have a housing crisis?
We do, and that's why we are supremely committed to building a lot of housing units. So far, between what we've built and what's under contract, it's 880 units, and there's more to come. So we're very supportive of building housing units in residential. There's a lot of affordable units, workplace units, all that kind of stuff. So we're doing a lot of that, but we also need to have some commercial activities. We just don't want it to be all residential. Remember, our mission is economic development. We have to try and help create some jobs and places for companies to come in who are bringing jobs with them.
Are you having trouble getting commercial interest then?
No, we're just starting the process. We're talking about it. The challenge is there has to be demand. There has to be market demand, right? So for a developer to come in and put in tens or hundreds of millions of dollars into a project that requires commercial uses and commercial tenants, there has to be market demand. I think you're all very familiar with the Providence market, generally speaking, and what options that presents. This is a long-term project, and we want to make sure we're focused on the long-term best interests of this district.
I also just want to ask you about the overall vision. We call this an innovation district.
Yep.
Some of the projects that have opened up there, while popular, like a grocery store, a hotel, I wouldn't necessarily put in the innovation category. So I guess, are we still trying to make this an innovation district or just a mixed use, vibrant district in the city? I mean, what's the vision?
So the vision is still, we would like to make it innovation, right? And the State Health Lab is a really important element of that. So getting 200,000 square feet of lab space right in the heart of the district really helps. We're already starting to have some conversations with other commercial developers who want additional life sciences or biosciences type industries in that area. We're starting to try and build a cluster there. And you've seen a lot of talk at the State House already. The Speaker is pushing for $45 million to be dedicated to try and drive that industry. We want to do our part to support that. But that is the tension we were talking about earlier between residential and commercial, right? We could just build all residential and then we've created no innovation. We're creating a lot of housing. There's value to that, okay? Or we could just hold out forever on only doing commercial and never do any more residential. And what we're trying to do is strike a fine balance. So we're systematically tackling things 1 and 2 projects at a time. If we can do commercial, that's great. We want to push it. If not, we keep doing residential. And at the end of this, we're going to look back and hopefully we'll be able to say there's a fair balance between residential and commercial.
All right, Mark, a final question for you on the program. And I want to ask this last because it dovetails into the second half of the program when we bring on Target 12 investigative reporter Eli Sherman. Look, we're seeing a lot of major development projects in Rhode Island quake, if not collapse, under the weight of inflation and the Fed's raising of interest rates to combat that. Pawtucket halted bonding for the soccer stadium. Concerns that a new high school in Warwick might not open because of it. The Superman building project is feeling the pressure. How is that impacting your ability to sell, to market, to lure interest in these parcels?
Listen, it's a challenging macroeconomic environment. It's probably going to get more challenging. So far, we're excited that all of our existing projects appear to be on track, but we work very closely with our development partners. We're going to see, I think the pressure may come on making it harder for us to do some more commercial projects, and so we're going to have to evaluate that as it happens. But as of right now, we feel comfortable in working with our existing partners that the projects are going forward.
All right. Marc Crisafulli, Chair of the I-195 Commission, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
When we come back, a reporter's roundtable. Joining us will be Eli Sherman. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Joining Steph Machado and I for a Reporters Roundtable is Eli Sherman from Target 12. Ted Nesi is off this week. All right, so I want to continue the conversation that we had on the first half with our guest from the I-195 Commission, Marc Crisafulli, but I want to broaden it to the other projects that we touched on at the very end of that segment. And so to set the table, I want to play some sound from Governor Dan McKee about some of the strain that projects across the state are facing. Take a listen.
Yeah, so first on the Tidewater project, I have full confidence that that is going to happen, and I want to really reinforce that. What my talk about interest rates is about whether that's what the Federal Reserve is doing is good for the economy in the state of Rhode Island in general. It is not good for the economy, and I think that we need to question why they're doing such a rapid increase on interest rates when we know that one of their goals is to roll us into a recession so that you have more unemployment, and we don't need that. That's not a good thing for Rhode Island, more unemployment. Relative to Tidewater, like I said, I'm fully confident that that is going to happen. Talking to Brett Johnson and others, I don't have a problem with that. You mentioned about Superman, yeah, that has been lagging for years. We provided the resources to the Superman building over a year ago when interest rates were low. I don't look at interest rates as a reason that would stop that project. They've had plenty of time to move forward, and I intend to continue to, work with them as long as they're willing to work with us.
All right, a lot there. So let's put a pin in the Superman building comment. I'm going to go to you on that.
Yep.
But first, let's address, if this were a Supreme Court case, it would be McKee v. Fed, right? This is Dan McKee versus the Federal Reserve. What do you make of what he's talking about there?
Yeah, it's pretty extraordinary. We were kind of surprised this week. Earlier in the week, he came out pretty strong and really blasted the Fed.
Yeah.
And Chairman Jerome Powell basically saying, look, all of this financial uncertainty that you're seeing with these development projects, and he really brought it up on the Tidewater Landing project, which is the major soccer stadium being constructed in Pawtucket. These rising interest rates that the Fed has been doing for about a year now are really hurting their ability to move forward on these projects and secure capital. And so, he's calling on other governors, he said earlier this week, and he's hopeful that they'll join together and send a letter to the Fed to ask them, please stop raising rates. I imagine that if he got enough of them together, maybe it would make a dent, but it's whether or not Jerome Powell is going to be listening to McKee as he's making up his fiscal policy at the central bank is hard to tell. And something to keep in mind, the Fed doesn't meet again until May to even make any changes, so we have a good month before interest rates either go down or go up, and they could very well go up.
They could very well go up because the Fed's goal here is to lower the interest rate. I think what the governor said, and that was, I believe he said
inflation.
Inflation. The goal is to go to a recession. I don't think that's what he meant to say. I think what he's worried about is that we will tip into a recession. I don't think the Fed's goal is to go into a recession. But look, so McKee's making the argument that inflation is on the way down, so Fed, stop with the interest rate hikes. I guess my question to you is, does McKee have a point? And to make that point, why don't we bring up a chart that you made that sort of illustrates the inflation that we've seen from the pandemic on, and that line that you put in the chart on the left That's the start of the pandemic, so March of 2020, and then that's inflation to the right.
Yes, so you can kind of see for yourself, but just to guide you, as you mentioned, the black line on the left is when the pandemic started. Inflation year over year actually fell, and that's in part because everyone was at home, all the restaurants were closed, no one was out buying anything. And then, as the federal government started pumping a lot of relief money into the economy, you started to see inflation rise to the right there at a very extraordinary level. And so when McKee is talking about inflation coming down, you can see indeed that has happened on a year-over-year basis all the way over to the right there. It has been coming down over the last few months. But it is still well above where the Fed wants to see it. In February, it was 6%. The Fed typically likes to see it at 2%. That's the sign of a healthy market in the eyes of the economists. And right now, it's triple that. So while McKee is saying, yeah, inflation's coming down, I'm seeing gas prices come down, I'm seeing housing prices come down. I think a lot of Rhode Islanders can still feel going to the supermarket that things are still really expensive. And the Fed is looking at 6%, thinking, well, that's still not near the 2% that we need. So there's a lot of different economic factors at play, and whether it's just the Fed and their interest rates that are really, affecting the market in these construction projects.
Well, so Governor McKee, to go to you here, Steph, said he put the blame on the soccer stadium on these interest rate hikes, but when he's asked about the Superman building, he didn't apply that same argument, and he really took a shot at the developers there. I thought that was my take on that.
Yeah, and the Superman building project, for folks that don't know, the building's been vacant for 10 years. It was announced last April that it's going to be turned into 285 apartments and then some retail and event space on the ground floor. And McKee said, look, we approved it, and it has taxpayer money from both the city and the state, and the governor said we approved this when interest rates were low. That project is lagging. I don't think interest rates are the reason for why it's not, moving along at the pace that I think officials hope it would be. There was supposed to be construction starting in construction starting in the fall after it was announced in April. And I spoke to the spokesperson for the developer yesterday who, fired back a little bit at the governor, saying, if anyone is surprised that this impacts the Superman building, they should turn on CNBC and watch Chairman Powell's press conferences. So what we were just talking about the interest rates going up, the spokesman, Bill Fisher, says that we're not dragging our feet on this project. There's a lot of engineering and architectural work and lawyers and things that are going into it right now that just take time when you're renovating a historic tower like this that's also been empty and decaying for 10 years.
Did they give you a sense? High Rock Development is the developer?
Yep.
Did they give you a sense as to when anything major timing-wise is going to happen moving forward?
Nope. He declined to give any kind of timeline on whether they are going to ask the state for more money. He did acknowledge that the total cost of the project has increased somewhere in the millions of dollars. He wouldn't give an actual estimate. It was supposed to be a $220 million project. And so they are just determining, he said, whether High Rock can cover those additional costs privately with private capital, or whether they're going to have to ask the state for more money. And then that brings up the question of course, will that money be approved?
I think something that's interesting about the governor's comments on the two projects, Tidewater and Superman 2, is that you have to think about how public money is supposed to go into those two projects. On the Superman side, that money has all been allocated. The millions of dollars that the state is going to be funding into that project, it's already there. For the Tidewater project, they actually have to float public bonds. They have to, come together and issue bonds out of Pawtucket, and that will have interest rates on it. So we do know that these interest rates are affecting that. But on the Superman side, the private developer is going to need to borrow money as well, and that is also affected by interest rates. So from the governor's perspective, he may be looking at it and saying, well, the interest rates are really going to affect us, the public, on this project, but the interest rates for the Superman developer, that's their problem. We already allocated our money. It's very interesting to hear his tone on the two projects. It's become different.
When you said May, that's when the Fed is going to decide what to do with interest rates. And let's say they decide to raise them or just hold the line. and not, in other words, and not reduce it. We have about a minute left here, Eli. What would the outlook for the soccer stadium be then? Do we have a sense if the developer, Brett Johnson, can come up and offset if the Pawtucket, if the city of Pawtucket doesn't float that bond?
Yeah, it's hard to tell. We do know behind the scenes that the developer has not finished its capital stack. So in other words, they haven't finished fundraising all of their share of the cost. And so if they haven't even been able to come up with their about $43 million so far, it's hard to know how much they'll be able to gain, especially if their prices are going up. But I think the most telling thing, Tim, is that these bonds that we're going to pay for the construction were supposed to happen by February. Now we're hearing no timeline from anybody. So it's really hard to know how sure anyone is behind the scenes about this.
Eli Sherman, Steph Machado, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week on Newsmakers.